What is up, everyone? Happy Fantasy Friday. Today, the First Law Trilogy, Joe Abercrombie. Why should you read this trilogy? First, I have to just say a few things about the series, the tone of the series, some of the graphic details in the series. This is a pretty grimdark series, so if you don't like things like graphic torture, there's a domestic violence assault. There's just like a bunch of things that are very off-putting to probably many of you. So definitely don't read this series if you don't want any of those things. But if you're okay with the grim darkness, if you're okay with those things that I mentioned, this is why I think you probably should read the series. Number one, everyone mentions this, but the characters, they're incredibly detailed. Abercrombie has a great perspective when writing about different characters. I think like everyone knows that, everyone understands that if they've read or heard anyone talk about this series. But in addition to that, there's like very obscure characters that are just people that have existed throughout human history that don't really get page time in a lot of other places. So I'll give an example. Chapter 2 of the first book, there's a character named Glokta, and Glokta is a torturer. Now, again, think about it. Most societies, including the country that I'm currently living in at this current time, have torture programs and torture people. However, like, we don't really, like, say that, right? We don't really get the torturer's perspective. Sometimes we feel like great sympathy with prisoners of war who were tortured and like held their tongue. Like these people are true heroes, but it's rare to get the torturer's perspective. And like, this is like Glokta's 9 to 5. He's just like, all right, I'm going to work. I'm torturing people. And like if I went up to someone at a bar and I'm like, what am I doing? Chatting up a girl. Hey babe, I'm a torturer. Like, oh my God, that's like the worst thing ever. Oh my God. Reset. No, but seriously, I mean, there's people who are like drone operators, for instance. I mean, like, their job is to like kill people. And I'm not talking about like soldiers, because like, obviously, if you've read fantasy, you know that there's plenty of soldiers. I'm talking about the people where there is such an asymmetry of power. Like, there's no way a torturer gets injured. There's no way a drone operator gets like attacked or something when they go to work. And Glokta is like a great example of this because he's physically crippled, but like he's still able to do like these just like grotesque violent things to these people to try to get like confessions or something. And like sometimes he'll even know the person's innocent, but like it's his job. He's got to torture people. I think that's what adds to the genuineness, because people are grimdark in real life, and we kind of turn a blind eye to that. And people turn a blind eye in this book to Glokta because he's a torturer. And there are 5 other characters too. Glokta's obviously my favorite, but there's Logan Ninefingers, who's like a classic barbarian from like, the rural northern woods. So obviously he's pretty gritty. West and Luthar are interesting because West is like the soldier that's worked his way up. He was, in an impoverished, poor family, and he's worked his way up in the army and military or whatever, and has displayed great bravery, and he's like a sergeant or something. And then there's Gisalda and Luthar, who was born like in a noble class, silver spoon in his mouth, has no combat experience, but like he's like gonna be a commander or whatever after he does this fencing competition, just because he's royal, basically. And he gets to sit in on these conferences and stuff, and it's just like, huh? But like, again, same thing, reality. Like if you turn on the TV, you'll be able to point to someone who was born with a silver spoon in their mouth, trust me. And then we also all know someone who's worked their way up from extreme poverty or, whatever, like the West. So it's like the Luthar and the West. So and again, obviously, these characters are well written. Everyone knows that. Abercrombie's a master at writing characters. It's this sort of like relatability from our world into their world, which is like the cherry on top for all of these characters, or at least almost all of these characters. Like Abercrombie's not using, a standard mage archetype from like, the D&D player's handbook. He's not doing that. He's using a real world archetype and plopping it into a fantasy universe. I love it. That's great. Now, let's talk about the plot, which is less praised, I think that's fair to say, than the characters are. In my review of the first book, I said nothing happens in this first book, which is obviously an overstatement. But it feels like this trilogy is just one book. And it feels like the first book is all or mostly rising action, minimal climax. It feels like the second book kind of climaxes, and then the third book, obviously, everything goes down. And also, like, the amount of falling action in the third book, that also is what makes it seem like a just one book rather than a 3-book series. So if you do read this book, I wouldn't just dip your toe in and read the first book. I would at least read the first 2 books. And then if you don't like those, then just don't read the third book, I guess. That's fine. Obviously, if you don't like the characters in the first book, you don't have to like keep reading or anything. Or if it's like more gory or the torture's more like graphic and grotesque than you expected, I mean, like, I'm not going to make you keep reading it, obviously, but, And then Abercrombie has other books that take place, I believe, in the same universe after this book. So, I mean, I would check those out. I will probably get to those at some point. I hear good things, like continued good praise of character work. And, there are parts of Joe Abercrombie's world building I like him taking character archetypes from our world and putting them in a fantasy world. Overall, I'm not like a huge fan of his world building. The soft magic system in this trilogy was a little frustrating. I would have preferred something a little bit more, that I could really be like, yes, I know what's going on with this magic now. But no, we didn't quite get that. In fact, like I thought we were going to get that more in the third book, but alas. Also, one last thing. I'm going to say very vague things about the ending of the series. So if you don't want to hear any vague things, you can like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. But just very briefly, the ending, some of it seems like it's wrapped up very nicely in a bow. Some of it, it's like kind of like, all right, there's still more to be told in your story, but I'm just not all that interested, and it seems like detached from the story Abercrombie was trying to tell. Some of it is not wrapped up at all. Like, you don't know, like, exactly what's going on or how anything's going to end, like, certain factions. And I guess that's, like, a personal preference thing. If I'd prefer to be a little bit more wrapped up than it was, but it is what it is. I kind of like the cliffhanger-ish nature at the end. And yeah. Anyway, yeah, like, comment, subscribe, join my Discord, whatever. And see you guys next time.